Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel. I'm the founder of Startup CPG, and welcome to one of my favorite webinars and topics with two of my favorite guests. We recently this year on the Startup CPG Podcast, which you should check out, did individual episodes with each of these presenters today. We did the How to Drive Velocity with Sales with Matt and How to Drive Velocity with Marketing Levers with Janice. And they are both bangers. The episodes are incredible. You guys definitely go back and check each of them out. But you're going to get a lot of that here today. So we figured why not bring back two of our most popular podcast episode guests to do one incredible webinar for all of you. So first of all, I just really want to thank both of you for taking the time to put this stuff together. I hope everybody in the chat will join me in thanking them also. So it just is such incredible information for everyone to have. It could not be more relevant for early stage brands to because we're about to get pretty tactical on all of this stuff. And there are many decades of experience for each of these guys and individually that you guys are about to get to benefit from. And there is a really good reason that we choose them to present this content. So a lot of trust and experience that everybody is about to get here. So let's do it. And I am just first, maybe we could just do some quick intros and then I'm going to pass to Matt to start us off on the sales side. But do you guys mind? Maybe Janice, you could go first and then we'll go to Matt to start with the slides.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Janice Greenwald. I'm really excited to be here today. I've been in marketing for my whole career in CPG for almost 20 years now. And I always worked on the brand side for mostly food and beverage companies, a little bit of personal care. I started at Unilever, and then I gradually made my way down to startups. And I've been working as a fractional CMO and marketing consultant for the last 4 years with emerging brands.
All right. And in case anyone's curious, I met Janice because she was just in the Slack dropping absolute heat on marketing questions, just stuff where I've been in the business long enough to game recognizes game. I'm like, whoa, I don't know any of that stuff. I can tell you're doing this with brands a lot. You have really, really good advice for early stage brands. You're doing the tactics. You're not separated from this high level advice trying to sell a service or something. You really get it. So I really appreciate having your advice for brands in here. And I know a lot of the great brands that you work with also really appreciate you as well. Okay, Matt, my friend, over to you. And then we will also just jump into the slides, starting with yours.
Excellent, Janice. Daniel, good to see you guys. Very similar story to Janice. Been in the industry for 35 years. Started out in big corporate CPG, 15 years with Dan & Yogurt, Sara Lee, and Coca-Cola before I landed on my first startup, which was Glasso Vitaminwater. And obviously resounding success, which led me to spend my next 20 years on startups, better for you, emerging, disruptive startups. Say half that time is in the food space, half that time is in the beverage space, but very excited to be here and eager to help everybody out so they can navigate this.
All right. And Matt, definitely check out his episode on the Startup CPG Podcast. We actually just dropped another one with him this week, which is Sales Ask Me Anything, where I took a bunch of questions from our Slack, which, as you guys know, has 30,000 people in it. I took the juiciest sales questions in there, and then we just talk through them all live. So that was on Tuesday's episode. Definitely check it out. Matt's the guy that I go and ask questions to about sales because he's just done it everywhere, 15 years food, 15 years beverage, all this stuff. He knows it all. So Matt, thank you. And I'm really excited. Let's get into it.
So I'm really, if I have to define myself, I'll define myself. I'm really rooted in the customer behavior and I'm rooted in the data. And the biggest part of the data is velocity. So want to level set with everybody here and really define what velocity is in the CPG space. And really that is a set of metrics that retailers are going to measure how your brand performs on shelf. Some retailers are going to look at dollars per store per week. Some retailers are going to look at units per store per week. Some retailers are going to look at both. Me personally, given all the recent noise with starting with COVID, when prices shot up astronomically, everybody was taking price increase, but the units weren't going up. So the dollars looked really, really juicy, but the units stayed the same. So is that a healthy business? Probably not. But for me, when you see units per store, per week, per SKU going up, you're bringing more consumers into your franchise. And that's the true metric of a growing, healthy brand. Next to that is, the key point here is that, these metrics are tracked by everybody and they're broadly shared. So it's important to, I would almost say go a mile deep than a mile wide, because let's say you have success in a retailer like Kroger, That data is going to be shared and seen by Safeway and Publix and Meijer and HEB. Similarly, if you're not having success at Kroger, that lack of success is also going to be shared with those other retailers. And if there's a buyer worth their salt, the first thing they're going to do, regardless of your pitch, is look at the data on how you're performing in the other markets.
Matt, in your experience, does that really happen though? And at what stage? Like an early stage buyer, do they like even have that access? They don't have analysts probably to churn that stuff and know about it. Do they even care at the early stage, or they're just going to take flyers on brands they believe in and look at your data versus later stage? Like you're talking to Kroger, Kroger has the data and teams
Totally.
to look at it.
Fair point, Daniel. I mean, in an early stage startup, you're not going to Kroger first. You're going to pick one of the more progressive, forward-thinking retailers. Most emerging brands have success with Sprouts and Whole Foods and groups like that. So it was just more of a broader statement. But yes, as your brand scales in years 2, 3, and 4, and you have a Kroger or a Publix in your sites, you need to make sure your data and velocities are solid. Move to the next slide here. So it's very easy to get your brand on shelf because the way I view it is you're really pitching to one buyer. That buyer is taking his or her gut and saying, you know what? I believe in this brand. It's either a value-added product or it's some phenomenal price discount to what already exists out there. So they're going to take it in based on their own gut. But the real metric is now it's on the shelf. It's going to be seen by a much broader, wider base of consumers. And that will truly tell you whether or not those consumers felt the same way. So easy to get on the shelf. Hardest part is getting it off the shelf. So Janice and I are going to talk about a lot of tactics that we can deploy to ensure your product gets off the shelf. And ultimately, when it's getting off the shelf, it's turning those velocity numbers that then you can use to build a story and take it to the next retailer. I'm going to bifurcate it in 2 parts here. I'm going to really talk about the things that a sales team can do inside the store walls, and then hand it over to Janice where she could talk about some levers you could pull outside of the 4 walls of a store to drive traffic once they're in the store. Prior to that, when you're meeting with your buyer, you should have a very clear expectation of a couple of things so you know what goals are expected. The first one is you should understand what the buyer's expectations are for units and dollars of the category you're going into. So to make it as generic as possible, let's say I'm coming out with a bottled water. You want to ask your buyer for this bottled water in the category, what is the average needed in both dollars and units to keep me on the shelf? And the buyer should tell you that expectation. Secondly, you want to ask, okay, how long do I have to get there? Because it's not going to happen. You're ramping up. You have either a new product or a value-added product. It's going to take a solid period of time to ramp your product up to the level that's expected. And in my mind, they got to be committed to giving you at least a year. You're also paying a slotting fee. So that slotting fee should buy you at least 1 year, like, hey, we're going to come back at the end of the year. We're going to revisit it, see where you are in the numbers, and then see if the brand makes it through year 2. Internally, the retailer themselves may have a set of levers, marketing levers that you can pull, in-store stuff that Janice is going to touch on a little bit. So I'll leave it for her. And then lastly, a lot of retailers say, well, I really don't have space. I'm going to stick you on the bottom row here, or way off to the left of the category, or I don't have space in the water, so I'm going to put you in juice. All of that can be the kiss of death. So when you are presenting and you think you have a sale made with your retailer, you want to sit down and ask about the planogram. You want to be, within the T, which is eye level, center of the category as much as possible. I know it's tough because you don't have a lot of leverage being a new brand, but if you believe in the brand and you can get the retailer to agree you want to set it up for success, help me get a good position in the shelf set.
So one question that came in, someone was just asking like general velocity numbers. So Matt, I don't know if you, because I know you've worked across a lot of categories. It's going to be different for every. I love your suggestion of like, well, ask them what their expectation is because it's also going to be different. They understand if you're a new brand and you got to build your story. I had asked specifically about condiments where like I've seen the Walmart data. There's like, you might have Hellman's, whatever, doing like 80 units per store per week, but you could be an emerging brand doing 1 unit per store per week. And that's okay, especially if in 3 months you're at 1.2 units per store per week. Like a good growing story at least can help you out. But any like general targets for people to think about, whether it's natural, conventional, different kinds of categories?
Well, Matt's a lucky guy because right now I'm working in beverage with Once Upon a Coconut. But prior to that, I came from the refrigerated condiment category, so I have pretty good intel on expectation. But I'll frame it up like this because every category is completely different. When I started in beverage, we were talking about how many cases you would move per day. And, when you think about your own personal self, all of us will have 3, 4, 5 beverages a day, whether it's water, tea, coffee, soda, energy, juice. You're going to have 4 or 5 beverages a day. Most consumers will have one snack a day, nuts, a protein bar, a chips. Beyond that, you know, chicken nuggets you'll have once every 2 weeks, entrees, a frozen pizza once every 2 weeks. Condiments, you really start getting into very slow moving categories. If you can do 2 a week, you're probably in a pretty good spot. So it really depends on the category that you're in, but think about how often you use those categories in your own personal life, and you can probably benchmark where you need to be.
And I'll drop a link. We have a partnership with Nielsen IQ for their Visor platform. You
Right.
can get 3 free reports from them if that's the thing you want to ask is about average velocity for some categories. You could do it, and then you'll get updates on it too. It's a cool service.
Yep.
All right.
All right, so some of the in-store tactics that you can deploy here. The first one is around a TPR category, and TPR stands for temporary reduction in price. I know we have TRP up there, but it's a temporary price reduction. That is a calendar that you want to present to the retailer that say, hey, we're going to have, in most cases, it's 4 drive periods a year where we're going to ask you to put up a discounted tag, which catches consumers' eyes at varying levels of promotion, whether it's 50 cents off, $1 off, a 2 for a BOGO. But you want to present to the buyer that, hey, over the next 12 months, June, September, January, March, we are going to have a price discount, which is going to drive velocities higher, right? Price comes down, volume goes up. Now, what most of us probably don't know in emerging brands here is what are the successful price points. And we'll talk about that in the next slide, because you really want to optimize and maximize your spend rate and your velocity in using your TPR calendar. The second, in-store, if you have a really groundbreaking new product and people don't know what it is, in-store demos where you have to get product into people's mouths is really mission critical. And I'm sitting in that boat right now. I have a great tasting product in a category that has traditionally been bad tasting. So people have a sour taste in their mouth from the coconut water category. So for me, it's super important for me to do demos and get product into people's mouths at the point of purchase in store. So I'm very heavy on demos.
Matt, you've talked about how demos are better for some kind of brands versus others. So you mentioned if there's a taste perception, but any other kind of categories or purchase behavior?
Well, taste perception is probably the anomaly, but if you have a brand new category that you're emerging here and people don't even know what it is, probably better to get it into their mouth. But I think the founders probably have a good read on that, right? And then lastly, we're all very small teams here, and we can't be everywhere at once. And if you do have a fast moving consumable, which largely is the beverage category, the snack category, those turn much faster and are likely to run out on the shelf. If you stock your shelf with 12 units and, it could be gone by Wednesday, you can deploy third-party merchandising, which are groups like Relentless, Dirty Hands, and even Base Makers that have these teams that are out in the stores every day amongst the 25, 30 brands they represent, and they are packing out shelves for the retailer. But most importantly, they're advocating for extra space. So think about it this way. When you go to your retailer and you have your shelf set, your planogram, these teams could be in the store saying, hey, why don't I drop a couple of these by the register? Or maybe it's a product like beverage, even though it's ambient on the shelf. Well, let me try to get it into the refrigerated set. And they could be super helpful, and you will notice a huge difference in your velocities if you can see it at store level, that the stores that have secondary and tertiary placements and stores that have cold placement will outstrip the velocities of just your regular shelf set. All right, going to the next slide here. I want to give some examples of what types of TPR promotions you could have. And again, it's a little bit of a framework here because we don't know what works for your particular brand, but you could try at varying levels of cents off to see what your lift would be, and then over time measure it. So, like in your 4 drive periods, the first one you're going to do it 50 cents off. The next one you're going to do it 75 cents off. The next one you're going to do a BOGO, and the next one you're going to do a 2 for, buy 2 for 5. And, you're going to measure with data. You'll be able to measure what your lift was and what your spend was to get that lift, and then really hone in on what's the optimal promotional price point that you should focus on. To enable the tag to get to the shelf, there's a couple of mechanisms you can use, and I'm assuming a lot of people here are distributed by UNFI and KeHE, but there's really three mechanisms that you can use to get that shelf tag. One would be OI, which is off invoice. Another would be MCB, and the last one scans. On the OI front, you're essentially telling your distributor, KeHE or UNFI, that, hey, for the month of March, I'm going to discount all my product that I sell to you in the month of March by 15%, and I'm expecting you to pass that on to the retailers. So it's off invoice to the distributor passes through to the retailer, and the retailer will put up a yellow tag on the shelf that says, hey, this month this product's on sale. Manufacturer's chargeback is where you might have a dozen retailers working with a KeHE or a UNFI, but you only want to put one of them on sale. So with that manufacturer, with that retailer, you're going to say, hey, just MCB me through the distributor for the promotional period. So if you have a dozen distributors and you only want to promote with one, the best way to do that is through a manufacturer chargeback or a scan. A scan is when each unit actually gets scanned back through the register, then they will bill you back for that unit instead of taking MCB on the entire load. Like a retailer could buy in heavy for March and say, hey, I bought in 400 cases, so I'm going to MCB you for 400 cases. The other way to do it is say, I'm going to buy 400 cases, but we're actually going to pay you based on the scan that sells through the register. All three are fine. All three have pros and cons. Probably could have a whole podcast on really the economics behind that.
Let's do it.
There are some dangerous pitfalls with off invoice. So we'll see that.
What are you doing with your calendar, Matt? Like how much is what? Like what percent of your stuff is under, MCB versus scan, for example?
Well, I definitely subscribe to the 16 weeks of promotion, and being in the beverage business, it's a little different for me because 90% of my business goes through my DSD partners and only 10% goes, I have a little natural channel overlay. I want to reach Whole Foods, Sprouts, Fresh Market, and Fresh Time Farmers Market through KeHE and UNFI. So I'm very minimal on my off invoice with KeHE and UNFI. Just a nuance of the beverage space.
Perfect. And then just in terms of like, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know if I can run that many promos. For an early brand, let's say ones that are more focused on like natural channel, high-end conventional, are there certain accounts where you think it's like really important to make sure you've got the right promo strategy, ones where you see it have a big lift, or ones you should focus on, or ones that you might even say like, hey, they don't always execute it unless you do it this way?
I would say a promo calendar is equally important to all customers out there, chains. The input for me, being in the role that I am and having been a prior general manager and having oversight of the finance, you want to have a spend that is going to work within your P&L. So normally in a startup or emerging brand, you target between 14 and 20% of your revenue to invest in trade spend. But, the deeper you go in promotions, the deeper your percentage of spend can get really quickly. And you don't want to have a product brand where you're spending north of 20% of your revenue against trade. So there's a couple of inputs. You really need a finance expert to look at what you're proposing and make sure it works within your budget. Because at the end of the day, margin is king and you're for-profit businesses and you got to stay afloat.
I gotcha. Thanks.
All right, moving on here to the next slide. Let me just scroll to my left. So that's a great segue, right? We talked about the financial aspect of promotions, to determine what gives you your best lift for your lowest cost. And as you're building your budget here, you want to make sure that you are mindful of your trade spend because you're going to have marketing spend, you're going to have G&A, SG&A, and all of that has to roll up to give you a margin that works for the brand and deliver the right economics. The last nuance here is, obviously some of us have holiday products or seasonality. So you want to keep that in mind when you're working on your promotional plan. When should you do this? For the majority of us
Sorry, can I ask you one question about the ads on the
Of course.
previous page? I
Yeah.
just was remembering this. Okay, because a lot of the retailers will offer you an ad. Me, when I'm like, I don't know who looks at these things anymore. They'll like printed out pamphlets. I don't know. Maybe I'm just really, dubious about those kind of things. I'm like, I don't want to pay for that. That's crazy. But it was also explained to me that like, well, if you do the ad, it guarantees the actual promo is going to happen because it's in the ad and they have to make sure it's really there. So some people liked it for that reason. Do you think about it like that? Do you really like ads? You're not sure?
Well, I don't think there's any risk to the promo not happening. So, I wouldn't do an ad because it's going to guarantee me. But, one of the questions you have to ask the retailers is a lot of retailers have a minimum spend. So if you go to KeHE and say, I'm going to give you 10% off for the month of March. And then you go to Sprouts, and Sprouts might say to you, oh no, we only put tags up for at least a 15% discount. You might have other conventional chains like Stop and Shop that say, we only put tags up for at least a 20% discount. So if your discount isn't big enough, it won't get passed through and you won't get the tag. So it's important to ask the retailer to get their alignment on like, hey, I'm going to do these levels of promotions. Does it meet your minimum requirement to get a tag printed on the shelf?
I gotcha.
But back to your question is, once we start getting into ads and flyers, like, is the ad circulated to the marketplace, or is it only the thing you're going to find on the stand when you walk in the front door? They have the flyer. You have to ask all those types of questions, but I have largely avoided ads myself.
Thank you.
But I also ensure that my tag gets up. That's the most important, is to have your tag on the shelf.
And you check that with your merchandisers.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And myself.
And yourself. Cool.
So this is a good time because right now I'm going through my promotional. Starting last month, we've been finalizing our promotional plans with both KE and UNFI for next year. Those distributors are going to ask you for 16 weeks of promotion, which is probably the right. But given the economic environment and depending on who you're servicing for those retailers, it's very possible to scale it back to 12 or 8 weeks. It's also very possible to take the discount down from 15 to 10. So that's something you should discuss with your supplier manager at the distributor level. They refer to it as a roadmap. So, in August and September, you're finalizing what you need to do for all of 2026. But keep in mind, as you go through all of this stuff, everything you're planning is really, at the end of the day, used to drive your velocities. So how do you find these metrics? There's a number of suppliers out there. I happen to subscribe to NIQ Bizer also. It's a phenomenal service. We're a very small startup brand, so they have a program for startup CPG folks, and that's exactly how I got into the data. But in prior companies, I've used Spins and IRI, so all of them are very good. But most retailers might provide you a portal or data on how your brand is performing in the store, but you don't know how you're performing against the competitive set. So that's the part where you really need to lean into the data. The data will also help you identify areas of opportunity where, let's say you're doing 10 units per store at one chain, and you see at another chain, they don't have a brand that's doing that level. You can take your data story, package it up, and then go to the next chain and say, hey, at a similarly situated chain to yourself, I'm able to outperform the category average. And that data will certainly weigh in on the new buyer to say, you know what, maybe I should give these guys a shot.
And I know we're going to talk about measurement also on the next slide, but another way to get better velocity is to have better shelf placement and more facings, right? And arguing with data is a good way to get that, right? So
Yeah.
I know I've talked to you before about what kind of analytics are going to make the best case to the buyer, but you can do things like, hey, I've been in the store. I don't know why you guys are giving our competition 10 facings. We have one facing and we sell better than them. Give me 5 facing. That's an extreme example, but to make a case to get an extra facing or get a little bit better placement based off what you see on the shelf and what you should be next to, what people typically buy you with or instead of. All of those things, if you get a little bit better placement, all of a sudden these numbers kind of magically start going up, right?
Right, for sure. And there's two ways to do that, Dan. One is to use your quarterly business reviews with your retail partners and distributors to really advocate for a planogram change. The likelihood of that happening is minimal because they only touch the sets once a year. The second way to do that is to deploy your third-party merchandisers and just let them go in and make the space.
And they just do their thing. All
Well,
right.
Let me give you a little sample here for the group. And Janice, Dan, and myself decided to get into the coffee business here. We're all selling our brands in Walmart. Well, this is just a snapshot of what data could look like. And I've put the 4 most important measures up here. For my coffee, you see that in the orange, total sales and the change versus prior year, the real important number there is 18, right? So my brand is up 18. This is 26 weeks. My brand is up 18%. The next brand, which is yours, Dan, is up 2%. Janice's is up 19. But you could see Brad's coffee is down versus prior year. So this is a data point that is very useful for you to go argue with your retailers hey, Brad shouldn't have 6 facings. I'm growing 18, 19, 20%. Take some Brad facings out and stay with the growth engine. The next one, which is...
Yeah, Janice my velocity is the best.
Yeah, Janice has the best per point of distribution. I mean, we got to watch out for Janice.
Right. So next is units, which again is my favorite metric, and I truly believe is the benchmark. Are you moving more units? Forget about the price. There's a lot of noise that could go into price. Let me give you two examples. You could have taken a price increase. So your dollars will be up, but your units will be the same or down. The second could be is you backed off your promotional calendar. So your dollars will be up because you didn't promote as much. Your units will be the same or down. So I don't really look at dollars. I mean, yes, you want to have both up because at the end of the day, it's going through the retailer's register. True metric of a brand's health is in units. Are you selling more units versus the prior period, prior year? So your brand should be growing. So that's the baby blue column there is total unit sales and unit sales change versus the prior period. This is 26 weeks. And in the time period in column C, I can adjust that to last week, 4 weeks, 13 weeks, 26 weeks, or 52 weeks. Right. Then in the gold, column H and I is total velocity per distribution point. This is a very important metric because chains weight some of their stores differently. You could have a very high performing store that gets weighted heavier than a more remote, lower performing store. And it tells you that, for each store in that chain, how many dollars and units you're putting through that store. So it's also a very important metric, total dollars per point of distribution and total units per point of distribution. So when I buy reports, these are the 4 points I filter it to, and I use this data and share it with not only my retail partners, but obviously I'm trying to build trust with my distributor partners. They are a big part of my success, and I want to show hey, our collective customer in Whole Foods, UNFI and us are bringing this value to Whole Foods, and so I share these numbers pretty broadly with my partner.
And you always need to know the story because, on paper, Daniel's Java is losing velocity per point of distribution, but maybe it's because I just expanded into a lot more Walmarts. I started out with those nice California ones with the high velocity, but then I got them all. Your velocity is going to go down. So it's good to know the context of it and be able to talk about it that way when you're talking to a buyer. And just a reminder, you can get this directly from someone like Nielsen IQ's Visor. I just pasted a link in the chat here. They'll give you a couple free reports. And even the data has gotten so much cheaper now. You can get an all access package from them for $10K, or you could even for $1,000 or $2,000 get small packages. So that's in here. And if you also everyone keeps asking about the slides because these are really good. They're going to be emailed out to you if you signed up for this. And then if you want to watch the recording, subscribe to our YouTube. I pasted that in the chat also. Cool.
Let me turn it over to Janice.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I think Daniel, you're going to drive for me, but if you guys listen to the podcast at all, you know that I am a big fan of the marketing season Ps. So we're going to take a giant step back from trade for just one moment. And I actually want to just say one thing is that a lot of times I'll talk with founders and they'll lump trade and marketing together in their budget. And I just want to say you need a trade budget and you need a marketing budget. And I wouldn't take from the trade budget to fund your marketing and vice versa. You need to have them separate. They're both very important and play their roles separately. A lot of people think of marketing as maybe just turning on social media ads, doing some meta buys, whatever. But really marketing touches everything in terms of how a product gets built, launched, and ultimately sold in the market. And that all goes back to the fundamentals. And all of these things are going to affect your velocity. So we're just going to take a moment to talk about these. And then we're going to dive into some real tactical things that you can do once you've already figured out all of your season Ps. But from a consumer perspective, you just really need to have a solid understanding of who your consumer is, because that's going to matter for everything. It's going to matter what kind of product you launch, what flavors you launch, what retailers you go to, who your competitive set. So really knowing who your consumer is, demographics, psychographics, and what the insight is for why they might want to buy your product.
And I know Matt likes this point a lot too, because he talks a lot about not just being sales, but strategy overall, because you put somebody like Matt, he's going to get you a lot of distribution. But if you're not getting that distribution in the right place, ultimately, you're going to waste a lot of money and time trying to get velocity where velocity is not to be gotten. Right. So this stuff is so important if you can get this right at the beginning.
And then speaking about the right place, one thing is in terms of category that I like to think about a lot in terms of the next C. There's a lot of different Cs and Ps. Category, I think I invented as a C, but I like having it there because I think it's a really interesting one is really knowing what category you're going to play in. I'm going to explain this with an example that is really old and is going to date me date my age a little bit. But I've always thought that this was one of the most interesting examples, which is Velveeta breakfast biscuits. Americans didn't didn't really eat cookies for breakfast. I don't think they did eat cookies for breakfast, but Belvita gave them this excuse to eat cookies by taking cookies and marketing them as a breakfast biscuit. This happened in about like 2013 or 2014, and it was considered like the number one breakout brand or something. Maybe it wasn't the number one, but I remember it being this breakout brand with Nielsen data because they launched their breakfast biscuits in the breakfast set. They basically took a cookie, remarketed it, and chose a different type of category to launch it into. And I think that that's just like a very interesting example of really being clear and knowing what category you're going after. I mean, I think other examples could be like in beverage, or for example, is like, are you going to be in the refrigerated probiotic section, or are you going to go for the shelf stable? Totally different type of category. I mean, you could be selling an energy drink that's, iced tea based, and you could be in the iced tea section, or you can be in the energy drink section. So just really knowing like where you play is going to be hugely, hugely important for you. And that's directly tied into competition. So that's a big thing with competition is one, who's on the shelf with you, which again goes to what category you're playing in. And then the other piece of it is your share of stomach. So if it's a food product, it's like which occasion or which product are you replacing by having your product instead. While Belvita cookies, I'm calling them breakfast biscuits, are breakfast. They're also, and not on the shelf with yogurt, they're still going to compete with yogurt. So you have to be thinking about them in the same way, but not necessarily like in terms of your packaging, which is when you would look at your competitive set on shelf, if that makes sense. And then your customer, which is your retailer. So we talk a lot about customers and consumers being the end user, and then customer being your retailer. And the customer is, I always, as a marketer, will say the consumer is most important, but of course the customer is your gatekeeper, and that's who's getting you on shelf. So you have to understand how you're helping the retailer, how you're going to help drive their category growth, because that's what they're looking to do is drive incrementality to their category. I will say a lot of brands are very, very, very focused on that buyer and sometimes forget that it's the consumer that has to buy your product in the end. So while the buyers might give you good feedback, if you know the right thing to do by the consumer, try to stick with that as much as you can. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to just take a moment to talk a little bit more about the competitive set, because I, in the podcast, kind of tried to describe a competitive matrix and how knowing who your competitors are might change your whole positioning of your brand. But I had a little bit of a hard time explaining it. So I thought this is a great opportunity to kind of walk through it. So this is an example of a client that I work with called El Nacho, and we make a tortilla chip. And when we started, or when I started with the brand, we were really having trouble pulling away from our competitors. We knew that we had a really exciting and fun brand, I would say. We were like a little bit elevated in our flavors. We were a little bit better for you, but we were still a lot like the other players. And we said, well, where is the white space? Where can we go? And we went through a lot of different kind of grids and different axes to decide where we should go as a brand. But we saw a white space in like the truly better for you coupled with the elevated snackable flavors. And we said, well, let's bring our flavors really forward, which is like our mango and our pineapple, and let's make it really better for you. And we decided to change the oil we fry in to avocado oil from a sunflower oil, and we use regeneratively grown corn. And we said, okay, now we're really in a different place than everybody else. And so I think that's really important just when you're thinking about what your product is and, again, your category and your competitive set.
This
All right,
product
we
is
can go to the next
crazy
slide.
good, by the way. It's so good.
Yes, the pineapple just won a Shelfie Award. Yay.
Yeah.
So props
So
to
good.
no. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the P's. Again, there's a lot of different P's that people use, but I'm going to talk a little bit about product, price, packaging, placement, and promotion. And then we're going to hone in really on the promotional piece, which I think is what a lot of people showed up here for today. So I will kind of race through the others, but just making sure that your product is delivering on the consumer insight, that it's actually a really good product. Like, I personally think you should be testing your product against the competitive set to make sure it outperforms, because ultimately you want people to repeat on your product. You can get people to try it with trade promotion and whatnot, and all these other levers we're going to pull, but repeat's the name of the game. If you can't get people to repeat your product, if the value prop doesn't work, it's not going to work. And value prop is directly tied to your pricing. So are people willing to pay for the product that you're delivering and the brand that you're delivering? And that's where your pricing comes into play. So making sure that your pricing reflects not only the value proposition, but also your margin goals is really important. I love working with brands who have a full pricing strategy. Have they established like their SRP pricing, by channel, by product line, and really know what their plan is before just going like one at a time and then backing into it later, because that could really be challenging. So if you can build that out ahead of time, that's always ideal. Packaging for me is like the number one thing as a marketer for startups. It's the number one way you're going to move your product off of the shelf is just having a great brand, great packaging. And that could be both your structure and your pack design. Is it differentiated from the competitors on the shelf? Is it clearly communicating the benefits it needs to? I talked a lot about this in my podcast. I have super strong opinions on packaging and just making sure that that's really a strong place to put some investment out of the gate to make sure that your packaging is doing some heavy lifting for you. When you're not on promotion, people still need to be able to see your product, even when there isn't a shelf tag screaming, I'm on sale. Placement, it's actually exactly what Matt said. Things like, have you tried to negotiate for eye level placement? But placement also refers to in terms of channel strategy. So like, where are you going? Do you have a strategy in terms of natural or mass or club or whatever it might be? And then once you're inside, what's your strategy in terms of the category and the shelf placement? And then finally, promotion, which is all of the things that people often think about for marketing. And we're going to dive into that. But trade promotions being one aspect of it, which are mostly price related. And then we're going to talk about the marketing tactics, some of the ones we're going to talk about now. All right. So just really quick, I forgot about this slide, but we have this funnel slide. So that's just showing, because people do talk about the whole marketing funnel. And my point of view here is for startups, this does not apply for every single brand, but for startups who just got on the shelf, paid a bunch of slotting to be on the shelf, and might have 6 months to a year to prove themselves. Unless you have a really large budget, if you spend too much on awareness tactics instead of the conversion tactics, by the time they convert, you might have already lost your placement on shelf. So you have to do a lot of velocity driving marketing in the beginning, in my opinion, and then move your way up the funnel. That's just my opinion. I'm just going to say that because other people might view differently. But in my opinion, like having the conversion first to get the velocity going. And if you're going to have a repeatable product, great. Then we can start building more and more awareness. So some of the logos and stuff that I have up here and companies that I mentioned, this is not all inclusive. I'm not endorsing them. It's just really just meant to be examples to show you how many different things you can do. I will speak about some of these things, but there are literally dozens of MarTech companies, marketing technology companies that are pitching brands, people like myself. Every day I talk to different companies and learn about new services that they have. And that's part of our job, is to stay on top of what these different offerings are. So my number one thing I like to tell brands to do is really retail media. It by far has the best return on ad spend. So like before you do anything else with your marketing velocity tools, if you will, I would definitely invest in retail media. Things like Instacart. There's also, a lot of people don't realize this, something called RTD for Instacart, which they work with 5 or 6 different retailers, Sprouts being one of them, where they operate shop.sprouts.com's sponsored search. So you can sign up for a different account through Instacart for that. You have the Whole Foods Market on Amazon. I worked with a client where we were selling about 3% online, because in the Whole Foods portal, you can pull it by online or in store. And they were selling about 3% online. And when we started investing in what Whole Foods refers to as WIFMA, we went up to 20% online. And that's, you have to assume, is mostly all incremental, I would assume, because it's a different shopper doing grocery pickup and delivery. There's a bunch of others. A lot of different retailers have different media platforms that they own. So Kroger has KPM and Walmart has Walmart Connect. So you have to kind of know what's going to work with each retailer. And I just wrote this in here, but a retail media buyer can also handle all of this for you if it feels overwhelming. I don't employ them like right in the beginning if I have very low spend, just because I don't want to be spending so much on non-working dollars versus actual media spend. But once you start spending a significant amount of money, it probably makes sense to have someone who does this day in and day out manage those campaigns for you, because they'll perform probably better. Then there's also retailer specific programs you can be doing. So as I said, like sponsor search, for example, it might be different with Whole Foods, but like Hy-Vee might have their own sponsored search, or Rayleigh's, and you have to just kind of know what the different retailers offer. You can find this out by asking your broker or whoever your salesperson is for the marketing playbook for that retailer, and then they get that from their category manager usually. So I just put some examples in here, but that might lead you to different types of marketing. Like maybe you're going to buy an ad through Whole Foods Market. This is just like a screenshot from their playbook. Or a Sprouts.com, they have different ads. Or Fresh Time might send an email blast. They might kind of sell you on these different programs that they offer through their platforms. But again, before you do those, I would actually focus on the retail media. Some of the retailer specific stuff might not perform as well, although it could be good to show your buyer that you're investing in the retailer. So it's kind of a balance between the two. Okay. Next up, we talked about merchandising already and the importance of that. So I don't think I need to be redundant there. I think secondary placements. I think another area though too is just shelf upgrades, which I saw when I worked with Base Makers. They did a phenomenal job of getting us better placement. This was examples from the Sprouts Innovation Set. And they were able, like when they were in store, to get a stronger placement there usually, even though it was planogrammed, which was pretty cool. One thing I would do is arm your merchandisers with tools. So whether that's some sort of signage or IRCs, which are instant redeemable coupons, just something that they have so that you can continue to drive product off of the shelf with that. More tactical things. I'm just like spitting out tactics here, but I know you're going to get this deck, which will be helpful. But there's a ton of rebate and coupon programs out there. This is literally just a sampling of them. There's a whole spreadsheet that some other fractional marketers and I put together, but it has like Aisle, which a lot of you guys have heard of, which is a rebate program. And these are like apps and in some cases websites where consumers can go and buy the product and then they get emailed or text back like a conversation, one-on-one user conversation, and then they get the rebate through like Venmo or PayPal or something. So there's a lot of different programs like that. Social Nature runs something similar. With Social Nature, you get consumer insights from that as well. And then there's bigger things like Ibotta and Fetch, which are larger apps that just require larger spends, but they might be great for certain retailers like Walmart or Target, but the spend might start at, $10,000 or $20,000 depending on the type of program. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. So next up, we talked about demos a little bit. It's like taking a breath. Just a few tips for demos. This is an example of El Nacho co-founder Toby doing a demo. I think it was like last week. And number one, train the demo team well. If it could be you, all the better. The El Nacho team is doing all of their own right now across New England. And I can tell you that they are moving a lot of bags of tortilla chips and more than we move with agency demos in huge factors there. So definitely try to look professional. One thing I wrote here was please no wrinkles on your tablecloth. That's like my biggest pet peeve is when I see a really wrinkled tablecloth. I'm just like, no, iron that tablecloth, travel with a steamer, bring it to the dry cleaner, whatever you have to do to make sure you look buttoned up, because you don't want to represent the brand with a wrinkled tablecloth, right? I'm going to just go home, really hone in on that one. And then some basics are things like having a table sign, maybe a QR code that takes people to more information, or maybe it takes you to an aisle rebate, or maybe it takes you to a survey, or maybe there's a place where they can sign up for your email list. So think about what you want to get from a consumer with that sign that you put on the table. And then maybe you have some coupons or stickers or takeaways or something like that. And then there's just a million other tactics. As I said, like MarTech, marketing technology companies are all over the place, but some of the bigger ones and more popular ones are ones like Catalina, which is highly data centric. You can't really work with Catalina, I don't think, for less than around 10,000, but that you can be doing like all sorts of different types of targeting of consumers, of competitors. Like if I wanted to go after consumers of Once Upon a Coconut for my own brand, I can do that through Catalina. Vestcom is an example of a shelf sign company that's really good. They're actually pretty reasonably priced. And just to make like a shelf tag a little bit bigger at the shelf, help you pop off the shelf. Insignia is another example. Neptune are other examples. There's just a lot of companies that do these things. And it's kind of up to you to do the research in terms of what's best for your brand, what's best for the stage that you're in, the retailers that you're in, and so on and so forth. Next up is activating your own consumers. So I probably should have put that first. If you have your own database of consumers, you have a strong social media, you have a good email database, for sure, you can activate those people if you don't mind doing a little channel switching from your D2C to your retail, which is something that I talk about with brands. But so email campaigns for sure, letting your buyers know that you are at these retailers is great. If you could offer them an incentive, even better. I was talking to a brand yesterday and they have a really loyal D2C following, but we want to bring some of those people to a new account that they launched in. And we said, you know what, let's give them a good deal, but let's have it be multiples because we know these consumers are going to buy multiples. So let's do a buy two, get one free. We wouldn't necessarily do that to acquire new consumers because new consumers don't necessarily want to buy 3 of your product if they don't know it. But for sure, a loyal consumer, maybe that's what's going to work. So that's the type of campaign that we're setting up with that client. And then social campaigns. I mean, these are just 2 examples of really promoting a retailer through social media. The one on the top is for El Nacho. The one on the bottom is for a brand I don't work with called Hume Supernatural, but I was obsessed with their CVS campaign. They had like creators cut up CVS bags and like dress in them and go up to CVS. I just thought it was like stuff that could maybe go viral. I don't know if it did or not, but I think anything that just like really showcases the retailer and tells your followers like you could find us here is going to help a lot.
I would make a
Next
costume
slide.
out of long CVS receipts.
That's one way to do it. Yeah. Totally. And then there's things like now I'm moving up the funnel a little bit, but driving awareness to new consumers. So, of course, there are going to be examples where you want to build awareness. So, I was just working with a client, Salula, that makes this most incredible plantain crisp. And we worked with a Costco influencer to drive awareness around in a geo-targeted way. So we whitelisted the influencer's post in those markets where we are selling this product for a short period of time for a rotation. So there's only so many things you can do in store for Costco with demos, obviously. And then I had Instacart, obviously, because I told you guys about Instacart. And then we were like, okay, what else can we do? And this was a really good example to drive a very, very targeted awareness.
How do you find the influencer that you want to work with for Costco, for example?
For this one, there's a lot of just Costco influencers. I did ask them for I'm not an expert in influencer sourcing, but I did ask them for who their followers were to get a sense of, I wanted to see if people bought their followers because a lot do. So I just actually wanted to see if they were in the right market somewhat, even though I knew I was going to whitelist, which means like buying ads on their behalf in the geo-targeted market. I just wanted to make sure that they were like real. So this particular influencer, Costco does it again, had a lot of followers in the United States. I looked at another Costco influencer that had like 1 million followers and they did not have a lot of followers in the United States, which was a red flag to me.
Yep. I got you.
So that's how I did it. But there's just a lot out there. And a lot of times like influencer agency or a social media agency, like I'll often ask one of my social media agencies for advice on what influencers to reach out to. So local events, I think, is a great way after you've done some of the other conversion tactics, really getting to drive awareness to your consumer, but only it really makes sense if you're doing it in the markets where you have distribution, unless you're a D2C brand, which is different. If you're doing events in markets where you don't have distribution, no one is going to know where to find you. So you have to do it where you have a good saturation. I always have a sign on a table that says, buy me here, listing the stores in that market as a critical component, maybe some coupons. They probably will have a low redemption rate, but at a minimum, they're going to sit in someone's wallet and be a reminder of your brand. I mean, I know I personally have like multiple coupons sitting on like a magnetic whiteboard in my house that we never use them, but they're just sitting there. So I always see them and I'm like, I should probably use that coupon one day. So they just sit there as a reminder and create more brand awareness, ultimately. Evaluating and optimizing is key. So before I do any of this planning, I usually try to model it all out and try to figure out like, what am I going to spend? What do I expect to convert? Some of these things you can't measure, like in terms of conversion, but a lot of them you can. So you could make assumptions around what your ROAS is going to be and ultimately what your cost per unit spent is going to be. So what's it cost me to move each unit off the shelf? You can compare things like demos to Instacart. But I also want to remind you that you have to look at the value of the consumer. So maybe it doesn't cost you much to get a certain consumer, but they're not a high quality consumer. Whereas maybe a demo is expensive, but you're getting a super high quality consumer because they've actually tasted your product, purchased your product. That means that they liked your product if they went and purchased it. So they're probably more likely to repeat on your product. So you have to consider kind of like the lifetime value of your consumer. So I would just say some of this is qualitative and some of it's quantitative when you're considering like comparing different tactics. But I'm always measuring and always adjusting kind of as we go along. It's a program. Okay, we're on the last slide and I just threw a summary together. So basically, pulling it all together is optimize those C's and P's per all of Matt's advice. Make sure you have a really strong trade promotion plan while you're testing and learning different types of promotional tactics. Supplement your trade promotions with merchandising, specifically if you have fast moving products, demos, and some of the marketing levers that we just talked about. And in my opinion, smaller budgets should focus in on the conversion tactics for short-term wins, mostly just making sure you stay on the shelf and make your way up the funnel to those awareness tactics, but all along to measuring and optimizing.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you, guys. That's so good. I thought maybe this is a new platform for us. I think we could try to take one question from somebody in the audience. Please, it's like a general question, not just like only applicable for your brand so that everyone can learn from it. There should be a little button, I think, down where you can request call in. If that makes sense, if anyone sees that button, maybe hit it and we should be able to try to pull you up on stage here to ask your question. So if anybody wants to ask a question to the experts here, look for that request call in button down here at the bottom. And if anybody finds it and wants to ask a question, then we can try it out. And if nobody does it, then we'll assume I either gave bad instructions or everybody's feeling shy.
I don't see that on my end, but I'm already calling in. So
yeah. Does anyone see it? To request call in, live call in button? Yes, someone's got it. Okay. I'm calling Tim up. This is very exciting. Here we go.
Let's do it.
All right. First time for us. I'll see how. Hey, Tim. What's up, dude?
That was awesome. Right on. Well, yeah, I'm just curious. For Whole Foods on Amazon, I've heard such great things about it. Our listings have some fatal flaws on them, and the Whole Foods on Amazon people haven't been helpful. Any recommendations on how to optimize your listings on Whole Foods on Amazon?
And are you on a walking treadmill?
I
right
absolutely
now?
am.
I love it.
Yeah, sitting can kill you. Read this book. It's very.
Oh, crap. I'm screwed.
I would say I'm not a professional media buyer, so I'm doing all of the basic things. I would probably defer to one of the startup CPG partners like Bronski Media to address those kinds of things. I've just heard different things about what types of ASINs you can load in. One thing you should do is probably negative targeting for your products so that you're not subsidizing sales. That's like one of the low-hanging fruit things is you can negative target your ASINs. I'm totally not a media buyer, so I don't want to give faulty advice here.
Yeah. We have partners in the space, just so everybody knows. It's hard for them to like come in and fix one thing that you're just looking for help on. But if you're anyone who like would like an agency to come in and actually take that stuff over, typically it's going to be like a couple $1,000 for their retainer. And then you need to have money to pay for the ads. We've just launched one with Bronski Media, who Janice is a big fan of also. If anybody wants to connect with them, you can send me an email and I can just connect you to them. My email, I'll just put it in the chat here. It's just daniel@startupcpg.com. And just put in there, like they can do stuff like, meta ads, like paid media, stuff like that. They could do the Whole Foods.
I do my whip up for one of my clients. So yeah. But I would say that the customer service for the supplier marketing is usually pretty good. So if you're having technical difficulties, feel free to send me a note and I can send you like all the contact emails and whatnot. And they have like a ton of videos and stuff like that for troubleshooting for sponsored search.
Awesome.
That's a good offer. Okay, cool.
It's actually for anybody else who doesn't want to email me. If you go into the Whole Foods portal, there's a section and you could pull down their marketing playbook and there's like 4 or 5 documents on sponsored search there.
All right. Guys, I'm going to wrap us up here because we've hit time. So everyone, please in the chat, give it up for our presenters today. They took time out of their day or days to put together this incredible presentation for all of you. I hope you all really appreciate it as much as I do. I see all the love in the chat. Thank you guys. Maybe give them a follow on LinkedIn. We'll have a lot more cool upcoming content, and you can check both of their podcast episodes out on the Startup CPG Podcast. So thank you, everybody. We will see you for the next one. Bye, everyone.